This is Visions Under Construction. A chance for our guests to share their visions and tell us what they're working on. For their continued support, we'd like to thank Simwith.com, who can turn you as a developer into a telco. Why not make CloudOnyx your communication partner? Go to cloudonyx.io. You can find everything about the VUC at vuc.me, thanks to Bluehost, and thanks also to zipdx.com, the conference bridge, and to voxphone.com for local rate dial-ins. And welcome to the VUC, now with blockchain. No kidding, but everybody seems to be doing that, don't they? So thought that was kind of a funny joke. Let me move over to the actual camera here. This requires a little heavy lifting. And this is my live cam. Okay, so our guest today, we'd like to welcome Mr. Denver Gingerich. I'm laughing because I asked him how to pronounce it, and he said, and I tripped. Anyway, Denver, welcome for your first time.
Hi, it's good to be here.
Great to have you, and we're going to be talking about what you're doing, which has a bunch of acronyms and names, but the place that people can go, it's Sopranica, it's Soprani.ca. There's also right. GMP.chat, right?
Correct.
I don't know what the one place for all this is, but if you look up, actually, if you type in Sopranica, with or without the dot, you will end up finding what Denver's doing. And he's going to talk about that in just a second. But Denver, as I warned you, we'd like to hear a little bit about your past. Now, you don't look like you're anywhere near my age, so you probably didn't start out with vacuum tubes and punching chassis. How did you get started in technology, and what was your interest in it, your initial interest?
Sure. So my initial interest, I guess, was when I was a kid. I was playing with computers. So I started out with DOS, then played with Windows 3.1 a little bit, moved on to some other Windowses. I guess my first programming was with batch files and DOS, probably a little before I was a teenager. And then I started programming a bit after that, and then went to school for coding, got more interested, and that's kind of where I am in terms of what got me interested in tech. And I guess, as I was playing around with things, I quickly switched from Windows to free and open source operating systems because I found it so frustrating to develop on Windows that I just needed to do something else. So that's kind of in part why JMP and the other things I work on are free and open source, because I want to let other people share in that same discovery that I was able to.
And you have your Twitter ID is OSS Guy, is that right?
That's right. Yeah. I picked that one a while ago. I might have made it something different now. It's kind of informal and neat, but yeah, that's me.
No, that's great. So you mentioned bat files, and I was curious. You started getting into languages. When you got into coding, what were your initial interests in language? C or what else?
So I guess after batch files, the first, I had a brief period where I wrote some Visual Basic, and then I quickly moved to C++. And then after C++, I've done quite a variety of things. I think these days, Ruby, Python are kind of languages of choice for me, mostly just for expressiveness. I like to write as little code as possible to get the maximum amount done.
And are you writing for mobile platforms, either iOS or Android?
I've done a little bit of development for Android in the past, but primarily what I write is server-side code. So all of the JMP code is written primarily in Ruby with a little bit in Haskell and some in PHP.
Okay. We're going to get into a little detail on all of this stuff, but before we do, let's talk about the genesis. Again, I warned you about this, about the genesis of the project, because how did this get started? Who is it for? And what exact problem is it solving? And before you start that, I know that what attracted me, this was said in, there's an interview article in Motherboard, which is part of the Vice network, I guess. And that's really interesting. I'm afraid I'm going to have to tell people to Google for it because it's a long URL.
Actually, I'll paste it into IRC here. If you want.
Excellent. Excellent. That'll be good. And I'll replicate that elsewhere. Terrific.
Okay.
This is
There
a
you go.
very interesting. This is a very interesting article that gives you a plenty of background on this. But what interested me was that this has to do with the current tracking of numbers. Many of us use Google Voice, for example, and of course, Google Voice is all wonderful, but Google knows more about me than my mother did. So, you know, I have different Google Voice numbers, but they could easily associate that not only with me personally, but also with any. Uh, I'm getting distracted looking at IRC, not Mastodon. I'm not sure what Dan means, but oh, he's from IRC. Okay, um, they know too much, and so you're coming up with a solution where we don't have to actually give names for these DIDs. So I'm going to let you go ahead now. How did this get started exactly in the process of making it, and then we can get into the modules that make it up.
Sure. So you mentioned
to first of all the need we're answering here.
Sure. So I'll kind of get into the history and then go into the problem we're solving here. So you mentioned Google Voice, quite relatedly, in fact. So I actually had a Google Voice number before I had a cell phone, and that was I think in the middle of 2008 or so. And then I used that for a while, and I found that it was, it kind of did the functional things that I wanted from an internet-enabled phone number. So I could send text messages using my keyboard, and I could call people using SIP with a couple hacks. And it worked all right for me. But then, I had never really liked Google very much, and it's always been a bit, as you said, there's always those issues with privacy and stuff. They know so much about you. And then when I started to see other things they were doing, I thought, oh, well, this thing might not be around for very long because they seem to be killing lots of projects. And it seems like they haven't touched Google Voice in a couple of years now. So maybe I should make my own just in case this disappears and I'm left without any telephony provider. So that was part of the impetus for starting the Sopranica collection of projects generally, and JMP specifically. And then when I started building JMP, I thought, well, we can solve a lot of the other problems in that pertain to cell phones as well, because even if you're not using Google, there's still all of the tracking problems inherent to using a cell phone, where your carrier knows where you are at all times because you're carrying this tracking device around with you wherever you go, and maybe you don't want to do that. So that was the impetus for creating WOM, which is one of the other sub-projects of Sopranica, kind of a sibling project to JMP. And so WOM is not as far along in development as JMP is, but it, once finished, would allow you to do all of your text messaging and other communication over this community-run network instead of using the cellular network. And so the hope there is that you will be able to get a lot more privacy and security that way. So that's, I think, probably an answer to your other questions in there, kind of what we're trying to solve, and hopefully that gives you some history.
Absolutely. No, that's perfect. The business of tracking is an interesting problem in and of itself. For example, they have in this country and probably everywhere, you can buy cards, preloaded credit card type things, right? But in order to buy them, you have to pay for them. I guess you can pay for them in cash, but there's still someone always knows who you are. So I guess one of the striking things about what you're doing in the free trial, I would have to say, is because there's a month where people can try this. And if they go to the URLs we're talking about, they'll figure that out. So you get a number, and the number, interestingly enough, can be in Canada or the USA. And I accidentally chose Canada first time. But the problem with this is always going to be when you start paying, it's with a credit card or PayPal or something. So eventually the privacy thing, the tracking thing is another question. But as far as not knowing who you are, that kind of breaks down because there's almost no way anybody can figure out to actually pay for something unless you can walk up to a window and go and give the cash or something. So that's a little bit of a problem.
Yeah, that is a tricky part for sure. I mean, as you said, JMP, if you're just using the free trial for 30 days, uh, you don't have to provide any personal information or any identifiable information at all, really. All you need is an XMPP account, which you can get from a variety of places, which you can get using Tor if you want. So all we have is that one identifier, which is quite easy to obscure any personally connectable information from. So getting the account is easy enough that way, but as you said, paying for it can be a bit tricky. So I have had people pay for their JMP accounts. They've just walked up to me and given me cash. That's one way you can do it. But I'm not everywhere, so that only works sometimes if you can find me at a conference or something. The other ways that are maybe a little less anonymous but more convenient, you can also pay for JMP using Bitcoin Cash or Bitcoin. We support both of those, and we're always kind of looking for ways that are a bit more anonymous, like Monero and other cryptocurrencies that are out there. And there's also a project from the GNU people called Taylor, which we're looking at, which aims to solve the anonymous payments issue online. It's not a cryptocurrency, but it does provide a way to use existing currencies to pay anonymously. So hopefully that one moves along and we'll have real anonymous payments online. But yeah, like I said, you can use Bitcoin right now if you want.
Bitcoin's a good solution. We actually had those people on, the Taylor people on some time ago.
Oh, great.
So that's interesting. About these acronyms, what is JMP and WOM? I mean, I know what they are, but what do they stand for? I didn't look.
So, no problem.
Sorry.
So JMP stands for Jabber IDs for messaging with phone numbers. So it's a little, it's a little.
No, once you know, it's fine. Once you know, it's fine.
But yeah, it's great. And then WOM is, let me see if you're quizzing me here. So WOM is WPAN of. Oh man.
Put you on the spot, huh?
It's in my talk here. Let me find you my talk. Anyway, the idea with WOM is that you have this. We use WPAN as a way of kind of indicating our interest in that type of technology. So the 900 megahertz, which is commonly used for wireless personal area networks, and that's kind of the goal, is to be able to use these technologies, but to provide you a lot greater range than you would normally get with those. So with 900 megahertz in particular, if you if you reduce the bandwidth that you're using, you can get substantially longer range than you can with Wi-Fi or other technologies that we commonly use over the public airwaves. So that's why I find the technologies we're using with WOM to be very exciting, is because we can get range that is comparable to what the cell carriers get, but using the public airwaves.
Okay, and I'm giving a quick response to John Irvin is asking about posting on Mastodon. All right, so we've got two prongs here that actually could be used completely separately. One
right.
would be the texting, right, which is the JMP part.
Mm-hmm.
And for that, it's a funny thing, Denver, because everybody on this call, and anybody who's even vaguely interested in any of this stuff, knows what Jabber is, knows what XMPP is. So that's nothing. And we probably all have had, God knows how many Jabber accounts, profiles I have. I think most of us are like that. But at the same time, the average person may have known like G-Talk or whatever that used to be. Now, Google abandoned, interestingly enough, a couple of years ago now, right? They abandoned XMPP, although it seems to still work. They don't support it.
Yeah, you can still log into your Google account using XMPP, but the thing they did turn off recently, actually it was just within the past month, is the ability to talk to other XMPP servers using your Google XMPP account. So Google will no longer talk to other servers, so you can only talk to other people on Google with your Google XMPP account now.
There you go. Yeah. So anyway, if you happen to have a Mac OS 10, you can use the messages application, and it will do Jabber. However, it doesn't do, this is a little pet peeve of mine, it doesn't do any of the encryption that, say, Conversations does. I'm getting ahead of myself because what I wanted to say was, okay, we're talking text. So if you have a Jabber client on your phone and you don't want to use SMS, which implies using carriers and so on, you're now on the internet. You have an app and you can talk to somebody on a desktop, on Linux, whatever, and they have an XMPP, they have a Jabber app and a Jabber account, and you can exchange messages and images. And this is part of what you're doing. Unfortunately, well, let's again, getting ahead of myself. Let's not talk about crypto for the moment. Let's talk about just doing that. So you have a really nice chain in that when you're looking at these sites, it explains. There's a link. Oh, you don't have a Jabber account? Go get one. So you click on that, and you've got some propositions. You can do that. Very easy. Let me get this straight. The starting point would be, for somebody who's trying to follow this and maybe get into it, would be jmp.chat.
Yes,
that gets them going.
That kind of gets you all of the information you need.
Okay, so because there's a really good simple thread to do this. There's a simple chain of events that takes you through all of this. So we're talking text right now. You get the Jabber ID. You use an app, which again, if you're on Macintosh, could be, if you're on Apple desktop, could be Messages, which is built in. You can get various apps. And by the way, I've tried 3 of them, and none of them do any kind of encryption that I can find, but that's neither here nor there. Conversations is an excellent Android app, and that was the one that I use. It's paid. It's like it cost you all of $202.49, I think. And that's something that I would recommend. Is there an iOS? There must be an iOS app for Jabber that's decent.
Yeah. So the one we recommend is called Tagase Messenger, and we link that right from jmp.chat.
Right. Okay, so if you're going to do this on your mobile, which does make sense if we're talking sort of SMS texting, you've got that app, you've got your ID. What's next? You need friends. You need people to talk to.
Well, most people already have people to talk to, and the great thing about using JMP is that since it interacts directly with the phone network, all you need is a list of your friends' phone numbers, and then you can start messaging them or calling them immediately using JMP. And if you want to, you can just move your existing phone number straight to JMP, and then they won't notice any difference. But if you don't want to do that right away, you can get a new number with JMP, which we can set up for you instantly on the website. And so that would be the next step, the kind of step 3 after you have your Jabber account and your Jabber client, is to pick that JMP phone number and then to verify your Jabber account and then get your JMP number that way.
Right. And here's an example. Here's a look at, I was talking to Denver. Let me see if this is at all. I don't care if the text is visible, but you can see it. This is Conversations. As it happens, we didn't send any. Let me see. I think I sent myself some images. See if I got Michael Graves on here. Probably, yeah. Here, look at this. So this is interestingly, this is one of my Google Voice accounts. And I sent myself, because you can never do better than talking to yourself.
What is the client you're using there?
Conversations, it's called. XMPP client. So there I sent myself a message saying, does this work? As we've done for the past 20 years when we're messing with these technologies. And it did. So the image was sent. It's an image of a cutter that I bought, that you need a cutter to open the packaging of the cutter. Okay. A little meta joke there. All right, so we've got that working. This is very simple to get going.
Right. Yeah, that's
a real
kind of
good
the goal, is that it's just those 3 steps, and then you have your account. You don't need to give us any personal information. You just do all of that, and you're ready to go. And I think the other big part that we want is for it to be a complete replacement for your cell phone number if you want it to be. So that's why JMP from the start has always supported both text messaging and picture messaging, and also messaging with short codes. Because a lot of times I think when people try to use a VoIP provider as a replacement for their existing cell service, their provider it doesn't support a lot of these features, especially picture messages and short codes. It's very hard to find VoIP providers that support those. So that's kind of the goal with JMP, is to provide a complete replacement for your cell phone if you want to. So you could just use JMP on Wi-Fi if you want right now today, and then you could cancel your cell phone plan if you feel you don't need coverage outside of Wi-Fi.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and once you've got that down, James, please, James.
Yeah, a couple of questions. Do you support mobile number portability at all, or number portability?
Yes, in the US and Canada, we can port in basically any phone number. I mean, might be a couple we can't, but basically every number we can port in, yes.
Brilliant. Okay.
That's it? That's all you got?
There's another one, but I'll save it.
Well, go ahead.
Later. No. Carry on.
Okay. Well, we were going to get to voice then and add that in. So in that mix, everybody knows what a DID is, but for those of you who don't on this call usually, but if you don't,
DDIs.
Oh, now you're getting slick. At any rate, this is a public phone number that can connect to, well, many of us have them connected to SIP URIs. So you get trunking or a PBX, depending on what you want to do. We have one at OnSIP. I have it's yet another thing where I have like 10 different accounts on all these different providers of these things, ITSPs and trunking and so on. There's a thing in France here, IPPI.com, IPI. I know that Andy, who disappeared, has an account on that. In the States, you have Callcentric is one that will give you a free DID. And you can, for the trial period of a month, get one from the Sopranica testing. And then it's quite a reasonable amount if you want to continue that and use it. DDI is in NANPA, Michael says. What's the difference between DDI and DID? Now I'm really showing my ignorance.
Well, a DDI is UK or European, and a DID is North American.
Yeah, consequentially, there are no DDIs in NANPA, because NANPA is the North American numbering plan.
I did not know that.
So there we are.
So you can spend all this time and still learn new things. All right, so anyway, we're going to connect this up. You're going to go get a note, choose a number from we're no longer, well, in the thread, in the sequence of events from JMP.chat, you're going to be able to choose a number, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
You want to be careful about the Canada, US. It's funny that because there's the same international dialing code, and that messed me up because I don't recognize all the different internals. Anyway, right. You can do that.
Well, I mean, with most people, if you're located in Canada or the US, JMP.chat will suggest numbers that are close by to you based on the IP address you happen to be using. So you'll usually get numbers that are very relevant for you if you happen to be located there. It's just if you're not in the US or Canada, I kind of have to just give you a bunch and hope that some of them are useful for you.
Right. Well, what happened was that I was not using a proxy, so I was coming from France probably. And I happened. At any rate, that doesn't really matter. You get the number and you communicate it to people. Or you start talking to people via text or calls, and then that number is yours for the month. And then if you decide to keep it, you can do so. Sorry, I have this cough that keeps coming back. You can do so by paying a modest amount, or you can also apparently port your own number in. I've done experiments with the Google Voice on porting numbers as well. It's amazing what it was like 10, 15 years ago. James will know this, that it was really a fight, a battle when you started to try to port numbers. It was really a major scene to do this.
Yeah, it certainly was. It was difficult, but of course it's got so much easier recently.
Well, and here in France, for example, I've changed. So I got an account. I was on free, and I wanted to take advantage of a better offer. And they do everything for you. In fact, they just ask for this. There's a code you get. It's a little like transferring a domain. You get a code.
Well, it depends which country you're in, and there are differences. So
sure.
In Europe, there's a huge difference between transferring a geographic landline number and a mobile number. They're very, very different.
Yeah. For sure. And I'm sure it's probably harder. The mobile numbers, the reason the mobile numbers are easy is because you get sick of your provider. At least over here, we have so much competition. You get sick of the offer you're on. As long as you haven't bought a subsidized phone, it takes about 2 days max to do this, by the way, because I just did it recently. But I mean, it's painless. You get a number from them. I think you SMS, if I'm not mistaken. I'm talking France now again. You SMS your something with a thing, and then it sends you back a code, and then you give that code to your new carrier, and then that's it. That's all you have to do. They cancel the subscription and everything. Of course, what you don't know is that sometimes there's a €50 fee, exit fee, but that's neither here nor there. So anyway, that's easy. So where do we go from here? What do we need to? I guess one of the things
I'd like to talk a little bit more about the architecture, the infrastructure that you're using, Denver. I mean, how does it all work, and where do you want to go with it? So what have you got now? Where do you want to go?
So what we have now, I would say the main component of Sopranica, the Sopranica collection of projects that we have right now, is JMP. And so JMP, the architecture is that we run our own server that converts the messages you send over XMPP into text messages. And we do that conversion by using a carrier that provides us with an API that lets us send text and picture messages that way. And then for the voice, you use regular SIP. And so that's kind of where JMP is. There's a couple of more features I would like to add to JMP. I think in general, JMP is kind of where I want it to be in terms of the feature set it has anyway. Of course, we'd like to make it a lot easier for people to sign up. That would be really nice. In particular, we'd really like to encourage people to own their internet identity. And by that, I mean for them to each have their own domain name and to host their own XMPP and other services, ideally email.
That was one of the questions. One of the questions I was going to ask is it feasible for individuals or organizations to host their own infrastructure?
Yes, they can do that. In fact, you can run your own instance of JMP if you want to do that. If you prefer to use my carrier directly and not pay me, you can do that. But I think on the other hand, on the other side, what you were talking about with, yes, you can definitely run your own chat server so that you can do XMPP on your own, or you can pay existing providers. There are a few of them that will run XMPP for your domain if you would like them to do that for you. But that's kind of a big part, is we just want to encourage people to control their own identity, so they're not using like an @gmail.com or something. They can use their own domain. And so they really are in control of their communication, and they can switch servers whenever they want.
Okay, what about federation with other domains? Do you do that?
So what kind of federation do you mean?
Well, federation in the matrix way, if you're familiar with matrix.
Yes, certainly JMP can be used with any XMPP address that you might have. So there are a lot of XMPP servers on different domains around the world, and so you can use any of those with JMP. So yes, JMP fully supports federating with whatever XMPP server you want to use, as long as it supports federation as well.
As long as it's not Google Voice.
Well, right, because Google turned off its federation, you can't.
Not for Google, huh?
Right, but I mean, in terms of federation, on the other hand, JMP is a phone number provider, and the great thing about phone numbers is that they're federated. Just because your friend happens to be using AT&T, but you're using T-Mobile, that doesn't mean you can't talk to them. You still can, because of the federation that is indeed required by law in most countries. So that's a great part about JMP, is you can use that federated network, the phone network, in addition to the great federated XMPP network that exists too.
Right. And now the exciting bit, where do you want to take this? Where do you want to get to?
Sure. So in addition to making JMP more easy to sign up for by integrating the sign up process into an app or something like that, so you can just install it, have your phone number, boom, ready to go. We would also like to do a lot of work on WOM, which is that community-run wireless network that I talked about earlier, because that's kind of the missing piece right now if you want to have fully anonymous usage of your phone number while still maintaining the existing feature set of cell phones. Is that when you're away from Wi-Fi, there's currently no really good options for getting any sort of data service on which you could use JMP, because you can use JMP wherever you have internet without some sort of tracking. So that's the thing we're trying to solve with WOM. And so actually I can show you right now what I have here for WOM. So I've been doing some prototyping, and this is one of the radios that I'm prototyping with. So this has a couple chips on it. One of them is a 900 megahertz radio chip, and then it's got this little antenna on it. So this one is USB. You can just plug it into your computer. But there's, of course, also ones that are a bit more, like a box that you have. So this one's got, you can see it's got USB and power. This one, you can put a battery inside this one, so you could just have it like sitting in a tree or something, relaying messages. And so with 900 megahertz, you can do mesh networking. So you could, in fact, just have one of these with a battery sitting in a tree somewhere if you want to extend the range a little bit further. Right now, I've tested what we can do with these radios is you can get dozens of kilometers of range. I think I got around 30 kilometers or around 20 miles line of sight with one of them. Of course, if you have trees in the way, it's going to cut that down a bit. But yeah, that's kind of the goal is to get this hardware set up so that it does work very seamlessly with JMP, so you can use JMP wherever you want, and then to get it widely deployed. So we'd like for people to be able to have one of these units in their house or their business or whatever, with ideally on the outside of their building for the best range, and then have that plugged into their home network so that it can provide access for people who are nearby, but in a better way than existing wireless or Wi-Fi mesh networks, because you can get a lot more range with these.
Okay.
And then
what sort of throughput are you getting on that?
So the goal for these is not so much the throughput. What you can get a couple megabits of throughput with one of these if you want, but where you really get the ideal range with these is when you turn down the throughput a bit to maybe more like 100 kilobits, and then you can go several dozen kilometers with that. So the goal initially is not to replace the phone network in its entirety. Our goal is not to be able to stream YouTube for 8 hours a day when you're on the cell network. It is to be able to do the essential communication, such as text messaging and other low bandwidth communication while you're away from Wi-Fi. So probably we'll be able to do other things with the public airwaves in the future, but for right now, there aren't a lot of public airwaves, and so we have to kind of limit ourselves to lower bandwidth for now as a result, in order to get the longer range using public airwaves that we don't have to pay the government for or ask their permission to use.
Okay. Well, how do you get, when you've got somebody with something like a phone, how does that phone get onto the 900 megahertz network?
Exactly. So that's another thing I wanted to ask people about, if they have experience manufacturing phones, because of course existing phones do not have a 900 megahertz radio. But one way we could solve this problem is to make new phones that do have 900 megahertz radios built in. Now you can see with this one prototype device that I showed you, it is very small. So you could envision using a sleeve for your phone, like a case of some sort that would just slide over your phone, and that would contain the 900 megahertz radio. So that would be one way to get the radio. And the other way you could do it is to use one of these LTE hotspots, use a form factor similar to one of those, and have the 900 megahertz radio with a Wi-Fi access point integrated.
Right. Sadly, I'm not in my study at the moment, because I would reach across and pick up an LTE Eno-B that just happens to be sitting there. You mean like one?
Exactly.
Yeah, I think there's a whole load of good news for you, because in North America, you've got CBRS, the Citizens Broadband Radio System, which offers you huge amounts of bandwidth up at 3.4, 3.5 gigs. And the really good news is that we're just at the point where the phone manufacturers are producing chipsets that support that band.
So you said that was CBRS.
CBRS, yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll look into that a bit more.
Right. And so if you've got a phone with a Qualcomm Snapdragon 835 processor, that, in theory, is capable of supporting the 3.4 gig band. But because the majority of handsets are bought by mobile network operators, that clearly they've had little interest in actually procuring handsets that operate on spectrum that's not theirs. So,
indeed, there's an incentives problem there for sure.
But it is coming. So at Mobile World Congress next month, we expect to see handsets that do support it.
Excellent. That's great to hear.
And in fact, we're going to be doing a demo at Mobile World Congress operating in that band, operating license shared access on that band.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'm really interested to see how it works generally, like what applications people find to use for it, and also kind of what the range is. Because
well, the good news there is that you can run bog standard LTE on there. And so what's the range of LTE? Well, it depends on how wide you're running it and what else is going on locally. But we're talking about 30, 40 kilometers.
Right. Wow. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I'm curious to see kind of more. I mean, I'm not a radio engineer or anything. I think the general feeling I've got is that the kind of the lower the frequency, the further it will travel. So I'm curious to see.
Yeah, that's not totally true. But and then there's another option as well, which is then the license-free bands. So there's another initiative called Multifire. That's MU, then LTE, uppercase Fire, being run again by Qualcomm and a number of other suspects. Basically, what that is LTE that operates at the top end of the 5 gig license-free band. And what they've done is they've included a way of detecting Wi-Fi. So the big problem with trying to run LTE in the same band as Wi-Fi is that the LTE will totally massacre the Wi-Fi, being a much more modern and much more aggressive waveform. It just completely wipe out the Wi-Fi. So what Multifire does is it detects the Wi-Fi and then backs off so that you end up sharing the available bandwidth. But using Multifire, you can put your own license-free LTE infrastructure in, and ideal for what you want to do.
Great. So are some of these airwaves then available for public use? Could I just run my own LTE modem right now? Like LTE station, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Yeah, because you're in the States, you have access to CBRS right now, and you can buy a cell, something like an Acceleran. That's ACCELLERAN, Acceleran E1000, and you can run that license shared access yourself now. But as we discussed earlier, the drawback this week is finding phones that will interwork with it. But that's just about to change. They are coming. So over the next year to 18 months, we're going to see a raft of different devices, both from the East and the West, that support both the license shared access CBRS bands and Multifire.
Great. I'm looking forward to that. Definitely.
Yes, you're looking forward to it. We are just so enthusiastic about it. You cannot believe how enthusiastic we are.
I want to get into encryption, but before we do, I have a question for you, James. It's completely off topic, but it's news. It's Alibaba. I was going to ask you the people in China that you often order from, and I have ordered from them too, Alibaba. Okay. So I don't know if any of you have heard this. which is that the OnePlus, I have a OnePlus 3T phone, and in the latest beta, apparently there was something that was sending. If you copied something, it was sent to the Alibaba server. I'm trying to figure out why they were doing this, but once it was discovered, somebody complained to OnePlus, and they said, "Okay, we're going to pull this out of the official update." This is with regard to tracking and security and so on, and leads me up into, besides the fact that your paste buffer is going to Alibaba so that they know what you're looking for and can then push out, "Oh, James Bodie, you're looking for such and such. Here it is, right here. We have it on Alibaba, and you're a customer, so why don't you order this?" Encryption. So Denver, I tried everything in my power. The Mac OS, the OS 10 messages client does not do encryption in any form, apparently. So I tried a few things there. It didn't work. I downloaded two different and installed two different packages. Neither one of them worked. From Conversations, which has three different forms of encryption, including PGP, which was complicated by the fact that you have to figure out how to get your private and public keys involved in that. So I didn't go that far, but it's maybe you can help me out here because I can't remember.
Well, there's OMEMO and OTR.
OMEMO. So
Yeah.
OMEMO, right? And OMEMO was developed by the people from Conversations, apparently, right? Or is that?
That's right. Yeah, I think it kind of started there, and it's a similar protocol to what, or it shares a bit of code and use case with what the Signal people made
Right.
for theirs.
Yeah, they call that the Signal protocol, but this is something a little bit more open or more whatever.
Exactly.
But the point is, I was not able to find a client that did. You mentioned to me privately that you had a desktop client that does OMEMO. What is that?
Yes, it's called Gadgem,
Okay.
and it works well on both Debian and other GNU Linux distributions, and also on Windows. But for the time being, they have not created a binary for macOS, although you could build one if you wanted to. They're using cross-platform libraries. It's just that they haven't pressed the compile button and made that available yet. So I'm hoping Gadgem will become available for macOS soon. But for now, I think probably your best options are Adium or some of the other clients like that. I just haven't researched how much encryption support they have.
Okay, but just to let people know, and apparently it looks like OMEMO is the most transparent, the most easiest way to do things. You get a message. If you send it to somebody, they get a message like you probably did today saying somebody's trying to do this, but your client doesn't support it. Which, by the way, that's a great way to do it rather than having some blob come and you don't know what it is. So that's good at least. But the point is that if you have friends, if you're all on Android and you all have Conversations, I guess, I haven't been able to test this, but I guess that if you send somebody an OMEMO message, encrypted message, they get it. Or they're asked to, how does that work? Could you tell me? Because I have not observed it. Does it say, okay, you got an encrypted message. Do you trust this person? Is that how that worked?
Well, I think it's relatively seamless. I haven't done this a lot with Conversations myself because I actually don't use Android or iOS.
Okay.
But generally speaking, with OMEMO, you would trust the person based on the key they're giving you initially, and then if for some reason it changes later, that's likely an indication that there's something fishy going on. But you can also exchange the fingerprints with the other person by using a QR code or by just telling them the fingerprint. In Conversations and other clients, they have a place where you can look at your fingerprint and read off the hex digits that it gives you there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And the suggestion was actually by a quick phone call to verify the fingerprint if you're not sure.
Right.
That
exactly.
could be done too. Sure. And I asked about the encryption. So I tried the various. I didn't try the second one. And PGP, I know what it is and have keys, although I haven't used that in ages. And the reason I haven't used it in ages is because all of us are on wire. A wire is yet another. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's another. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like Signal, like Telegram, Telegraph, whichever it is. I don't know. I haven't used those. But the point is, Wire. We know the folks at Wire. Now, here's the loaded question of the year for you, though, which is that if we're on Wire, we have end-to-end encryption. We know the people. We trust them. We can also do phone calls or audio calls. We can do video calls, and we can do exchanging of files and and images and any arbitrary text files, really. So then it becomes a question of, if you have Wire on your phone, why would you need anything else? Wire or send anything else that you trust, like Signal.
Right. I guess it all comes down to federation, in my opinion, because with federation, people can use whatever clients they want. They can use whatever servers they want. They can run their own server if they want. Whereas with Wire and other tools like that, you have to put a lot of your faith in whoever the maker of the tool or the runner of the server that you're using is. So that's why I prefer the federated services.
And that's a good answer. And the second good answer is try to drag somebody onto Wire if they're not already there, or Signal if they're not already there, or any of the others. So yeah, definitely. And Mo Paris the Best says, and he's quite right, or he or she, I don't know who that is right in saying that the clients are open source, but the servers are not. And we kind of see why the servers aren't for the moment, but these are interesting times we live in, and these are interesting tools, all of them. I have no trust in anybody that I don't know. We've hung out at the Wire headquarters. We know them very well. So we have a high level of trust for them, but hey, that's just us, right, James?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, super crew, and nice barbecues, nice cocktails on their rooftop terrace in Berlin.
The only problem is they're in Berlin. We're trying to get to Berlin for May 14th for Camaillo World, May 14th to 16th, and we have no rooms.
Yeah, we found out we're double booked with the Formula E, which is taking place in the same place, and so there are no hotel rooms, which is
a sport that isn't a sport. Okay, Andy isn't here to appreciate the fact that I do not believe that any kind of racing with machines is a sport. If you believe that, then gaming is a sport. Okay.
Well, isn't it?
Well, I guess it is. Anyway, Denver, where have we not gone that we should with this?
Sure. So I think one of the things that you mentioned as being great about free and open source project like JMP and Sopranica is that people can build on it and help out with it, even if they're not employed by me or whoever else happens to be running JMP. So I wanted to spend a little time talking about the different ways that people can help out and kind of the things that we are really interested in building on. So one of the things that I mentioned with WOM is that we'd really like to have a lot of people that are signed up to start running WOM gateways, so that once we have the hardware ready to ship out to people, that people can start setting up that network right away, because they already know kind of the people to talk to, and that we already know, we already have a way of contacting them to let them know it's ready. So that's something I'll paste in here into the IRC chat. There's this list, the WOM operatives list. And so you can join that list, and then once you're on the list, we'll let you know when we're ready to deploy the hardware, and hopefully we can then get decent coverage, at least in metro areas, when we have a bunch of people signed up to do that. So hopefully from day one, we'll be able to provide something comparable to the existing cell networks, but in a community-run way, and using hardware and software that people control themselves instead of having to use the cell carriers for that. So that's one way to get involved. The other way to get involved, I think you kind of alluded to it a little bit, is that since JMP uses XMPP, which is a great federated messaging protocol, a lot of the things that would help JMP move forward are things that would help XMPP move forward as well. And you were talking about the situation on Mac OS where it's a bit tricky to find a client that supports all of those encryption types that you would like to use. So one way that people can help is if they write software, if they are familiar with these, that they could improve on existing Jabber and XMPP clients for Mac OS and for other operating systems where the support is not as good yet. And for my own part, I would highly recommend that any people who write software for iOS get in touch with me, and I can tell them kind of some places that we'd really like to see some better support for iOS as far as Jabber and XMPP go, because right now on iOS it's a little trickier to get all of the right notifications and stuff that people like to have with a messaging client. On Android, our problems are solved. Conversations is a wonderful client, and I think as people mentioned in IRC, you can get it on F-Droid if you want, free of charge, in case you don't want to pay for it on the Play Store. But we would recommend paying for it if you can, because it helps out the future development of that application. But yeah, definitely for iOS, if you are a developer, that would be great if you could help with that. And I guess more specifically as it pertains to JMP, one of the things we'd really like is to have support for signing up directly from an existing Jabber or XMPP client. So if you write either iOS or Android apps, it would be great if you could get in touch so that we can kind of explain how we might be able to do that, and you might be able to help out with that project as well. So I think those are kind of the big ways that people can help. And yeah, down the road, I think it would be great to have more people involved with the hardware and software development that go along with WOM and getting those radios ready to go. But I think maybe right now it's a little premature for that. But if you have kind of higher level ideas or information on how to do these things that other people on this call have talked about a bit, that would be great, because we'd really like to know kind of what the technologies are like right now and what we should be using for these projects. So yeah, that would be great to hear more about. And I think kind of the last thing on that is the SIM cards and cell phones. We've talked about the cell phones a little bit, getting radios into that. And I know people have knowledge on this call about both of these, but if more people want to tell me, give me more information on how to build our own SIM cards or make our own cell phones that would include these 900 megahertz radios that we can use for WOM, please reach out and let me know about that. So yeah, I can talk about the SIM cards a little more if you wanted me to. I know we haven't gone into that a whole lot in this call so far. But,
well, let's talk about SIM cards.
Yeah, sure. let me just repeat this, because people, if they're in the middle of this, so if you go to jmp.chat, this is the way you can follow the whole progression. If you don't need a number, you don't need a Jabber ID, that's fine. But go through this and you'll see, and there's plenty of there's facts, links, and there are, as far as I remember, there's a way to contact people. There's a mailing list link and so on. jmp.chat. It's pretty easy to say, and here I have it printed out for you. Okay, go ahead. James, did you have a question, or was Denver was going to go ahead? All right, Denver, go. Take it away.
I want to understand how the SIM card piece fits in with the XMPP and how you want to use the cryptographic key variables to protect the traffic.
Sure. So the goal I had with using the SIM card was to what is actually a bit orthogonal to using XMPP. The goal with the SIM card is to allow someone who's been using their phone for a long time and is very comfortable with it and really doesn't want to change how they use it, to just replace their SIM card and then start using JMP right away, so that they don't need to change any of the ways that they do things. They don't need to use different software. They can still use the same messaging app and phone app that they used, but instead of going over the cell phone network, all their traffic will instead go over the internet using JMP on the back end, but not requiring them to change their use pattern at all on the front end. And this would also allow us to support any phone trivially, because as long as it supports SIM cards, then we can support we can do this stuff over the internet. And ideally, in order to get that support across all phones, we would have to have quite a bit of smarts in the SIM card to do all that conversion from the text messaging into something that goes over the data connection automatically. But I feel like the SIM cards are pretty smart these days, so we should be able to do that.
Yeah. Well, if you only want to do text messaging, I mean, there's a very easy way of doing that, and that's that you just tunnel all of your messaging traffic down across the signaling channel, which of course is always, the signaling channel is always on. It's free, and it has to be open and free, because that's how you signal, how you authenticate. So what that means is you can actually, you could, and this is being recorded, so I can't watch what I say, but someone could conceivably run a complete messaging service without actually attaching to the network, because you just use the signaling channel to pass your traffic. I mean, those of us who are a little bit older may remember the days when people used to have ISDN phones and run email across the D channel, the 16 kilobit D channel, signaling channel. So you could get, well, I'm reliably informed that people were getting about 2.4 kilobit or so for email traffic. But in those days, you could just trickle your email traffic through without actually having to set up a circuit switch link, and it was all free. And of course, you can do a similar sort of thing with a SIM card, or one could do it, as long as you control the SIM card and you control the crypto and the bit at the other end that you're signaling to. So there's a thought for you.
So how would that signaling portion work then? I mean,
well, I'm not going to tell you on a live broadcast, am I? I'll tell you afterwards.
No, but what we need to do is find a channel. But before we do that, let's just make sure that we've said everything so that we can stop the public broadcast and move on to the mature audiences only. And also, I need to go cook dinner and so on and so forth. So let's make sure that we've said everything. I think that jmp.chat is the way to go to find out everything. In fact, you know what? I'm really dying to show this. I'm going to share the screen if I can. I can find it. And here it is. Okay, so here's a screen. This is what this looks like when you go to jmp.chat, and you've got some DIDs, some incoming numbers that are proposed. But this is really, I mean, it's just text, but it's got all the links and everything you'd ever need to understand this stuff. So recommend you go to that. That would be the first place to check for to get into touch. Now, the thing that we're going to determine after we go off of public broadcast is how James and Denver can be in touch, because James, you're horrible at email. I'm sorry. So Denver's very good, but you're atrocious. You're atrocious at email. So
75,000 unanswered or unopened emails.
Yeah, well, 74,999 are probably from me. Have we forgotten anything before we cut off the public portion of this call? Denver, jmp.chat, they're good.
Yeah, great. I just wanted to say sign up for our monthly notification list. We'll let you know what's happening with JMP no more than once a month. And yeah, we'll just send you email updates there, and you can see how things are going with us.
These are quiet lists. I can attest to the fact that there's like one message a month or something. So sign up for them. I have. And with that, remember, VUC is new with blockchain. Not really. But anyway, we'll see you next week. And we've got some great guests coming up, including people who you can look at by going to vuc.me/ topics. Okay? Great stuff. Chris Matthews coming on with computes. We have Mr. Paul Vixie coming in February as well. That'll be his second visit, and a whole bunch of interesting other things. Join us then. See you next week. Ciao.